Okay, I'm sorry.
What is the reception of Oyotunji in Nigeria? What do people say? How do you get received? How are you treated when you're over there? And more specifically by the Oni of Ife?
Well, we were invited right after Oba Tuaja, or after the king went through the rafters. Or for your listeners who may not understand that, we were invited after the ascension of the first king to the palace of the Oni of Ife, who is the Oba of the town of Ile-Ife in Nigeria. And there we were invited to come and do all of the preliminary rituals proper for the installation of a new Oba. And so, of course, we had the chance to sit with His Majesty and discuss some things about Yoruba culture, our history, and the future. And we also were received quite well. It's interesting that, I grew up in America. I'm a Yoruba American, grew up in America with the Yoruba experience. And I didn't believe that I can go to a land ever and see, people doing the same thing. Kunle, people who dobale, people who wear asha. When little kids, I remember, walked in the room when I was sitting in it, they knew exactly what to do when they walked in the room. And that took me right back to Tunji. I was like, wow. And everything my father ever told us about African culture that we didn't like, because, we didn't like it all. Many people didn't like some of the stuff that my father had proposed and implemented and initiatives. But everything he did, for the most part, 99.98% was correct, right according to the book of how Yoruba people live. And if you know the culture in Oyotunji, then you can go to Africa and be received just like a Yoruba. Because when you go there and you say, yes, I'm from America, I'm a Yoruba, they're going to say, you're a Yoruba? What are you? Just to be a Yoruba is not enough. You have to be Egba, you have to be Oyo, you have to be Ife, you have to be Jebu, you have to be Takpa, And so I was able to bridge that from the knowledge that I was given from being brought up as a youth. So in the streets of Nigeria, we could be just driving in a car, and many people would see the royal regalia. They would see the beads or the adeleke, which is the beaded crown, and, people would dobale in the streets. They would rush the car. They would try to find out. And then it was very interesting once people found out that we were not Yoruba from Nigeria. Now here comes the big dialogue. Here comes the big conversation. And at that particular point, I found myself lots of times educating my people there about how we ended up here and why we even have a village and why we have tribal marks. And basically I end up telling them that it was a self-determination effort to go back to the tradition that was lost. And lots of times they say, well, Kabiesi, a gentleman told me in Nigeria, he said, Kabiesi, I respect you, because you are trying to promote what we are losing every day here in this country of Nigeria. His name was Aziz. And he said, because our country is being overrun with foreigners, foreign religion and foreign culture. My kids don't speak Yoruba, but you speak Yoruba. And I was like, wow, I'm thinking, I'm in Yoruba land. Everybody's practicing this culture. But it wasn't the case. And so ultimately we were received with grand, spectacular pomp and circumstance at the airport and the like. And so those are the type of things that I envision seeing in this country. And that's why I travel to Brazil often, and I travel to the different outposts of Yoruba culture in the Western Hemisphere, is to constantly get a taste of Yoruba culture being in contemporary society, because that's how we were taught. My father always said, one day everybody in the United States would know something about the Yoruba culture or about their traditional ancestry. But he also said it's going to take 100 years. But in the meantime, those of us who are practicing and studying can oftentimes go back to Africa and reintroduce the culture to those people who have been indoctrinated with British ways. And so we were received well. It was a serious, mind-blowing experience. And I am a filmmaker as well, for those who don't know, and I'm going to be putting together a film about the entire experience very soon. But as I returned to the United States, I was saddened once again, to see that the culture had not existed like I thought it existed in my head in Nigeria. You know, I say, wow, America is much more similar. When I get back to the United States, it's divisions, it's people who don't like each other, which is common. Not to say that's uncommon. That's okay, but there's so much of I, and no we. And so when I would do talks in different cities after I returned, I would always talk about how the people in Nigeria impressed me with their gentleness, their fondness of culture, and how they display it. Interestingly enough, some women were by visiting at our hotel in Ile-Ife, and my Iyaoba, or the king's mother, had walked in from an event with the Oni earlier that day. She walked in, my mother, she walked in, and the ladies who were there immediately, when she went to the back, she was like, oh, I'm tired, I don't know what to do, it's so hot in Africa. She went to the back, the ladies who were sitting there, accompanied her, like maids in waiting. Never met her before in their life, but they knew her position. They said, Yalba, okay. They went to the room, they took off her gele, folded it up, got her bed ready, ran her a shower, and everything. And I'm looking like, wow, this is like culture 101 for me. When you're practicing this thing, you have to have it in you. If it's not in you, it won't show. And so, as the Yoruba say, in order for a king to be a good king, he has to have served 75% of his prior life, served in order to be served.
That's right. We have another caller on the line, Kabir, so we're going to go ahead and bring them in. If you would like to talk to His Highness, call 347-934-0126. Uh-oh, they went back off, so I guess they don't want to ask a question. Okay, if you want to talk, Kabir, 347-934-0126. 347-934-0126, and press the number 1, and that will let me know that you have a question or a comment. I would like to discuss crime and punishment and how it works in the community of Oyotunji.
Well, essentially, don't do the crime if you can't do the time. Basically, there are laws, ordinance, and rules set up. And for one who breaks those laws, ordinance, or cultural codes or ancestral codes, then they are subject to the full due process of the village law. And so there are various levels. There's obviously misdemeanor type, and there's obviously ones that break the ancestral code. The ancestral code can be equivalent to capital punishment or a capital case in contemporary society. And so if you break the ancestral code, 9 times out of 10, Adagba, who is the executioner, Egun, or he is the punisher giver of the Egun, and his Egungun will appear and come knocking at your door. And so I remember as a child, they used to always tell us, don't act up because Adagba can come knocking at your door. And a few people had that happen to them here in Oyotunji. And, of course, it's to be expected. And so there's a crime, there's a punishment to go along with it. If there's a land dispute, it's settled within the court of the traditional chiefs and landowners, or the was commonly known as the Ogboni. The Ogboni in Oyotunji was set up in the early 70s to be the governing body of Oyotunji. And, of course, that's headed by the Oba. But the chiefs and the body of the village actually run it. And so when people get into wondering why do we need an Oba to run everything, well, the Oba doesn't run everything. The Oba is, of course, a final decision when a decision cannot be made amongst people. And so oftentimes we find ourselves just making final decisions, but the ultimate conduct and the ultimate business of the day and the town is conducted pretty much by the townspeople. They pretty much live out their self-determination. And so in terms of punishment, yes. Many years ago, when Oyotunji was first established as part of the mystique of the history, there were a set of rods that were given, a particular number of rods. Initially, they began to give these rods on the backs of men who would fracture the law, so to speak. And they would have to remove their shirt, and they would receive a set number of lashes on their back for a particular crime that they committed, because we did not have a system, or were not interested in a system of imprisonment or a system of confinement for people. It was enough to be confined for your initiation. But at the same time, we didn't have a system of confinement, and so once the rods began to fade, then a system of financial fine came into play. But of course, for the rods are still are still on the books as of today for someone who commits a heinous activity. And then oftentimes, if it's something that we cannot handle, then obviously we call in the local authorities. But the history of Oyotunji is so intriguing that the local authorities for many years would rely on the village to deal with itself. They had realized that, okay, these African descendants down here are about something, so let's sit back and watch and see what they do. And so once they figured out and realized that we had a system to take care of a lot of weird people comes to Oyotunji, as you can imagine. African Americans, we have a diverse group of people. It's not all going to be doctors and lawyers, and for the most part, you're going to get people who are traumatized as a result of post-slavery, and so and post-colonialism. And so those people arrive here, and when they did arrive at Oyotunji, if there was a robber or something before, then if the sheriff wanted to know, we developed a policy that, look, you had to go and see the sheriff because you're jeopardizing everyone here, and the sheriff got to understand that. And then I remember, as a youth, we had got into some trouble at the movies one night. I believe one of the young men had tried to sneak in the movies, run past the lady, and he was, of course, dressed in Yoruba clothes. And I remember when the lady pulled the young man out and called the sheriff, of course he was underage, then the young man said, you know what? I ought to call Baba on you. Baba is what the local community called the first king of Oyotunji. It was their way of saying Baba, but they would say Baba. They said, I'm going to call Baba on you. How about I call Baba? You know? And so that kind of thing took hold in that the local authorities, the sheriff and the like, would say, okay, you know, I know when their young people come out, we're expecting their young people to act a particular way. They're not going to act like the typical vagrant. And so that respect was given, and it's still cherished to this day. And so if I have a gentleman here who came seeking guidance, but he's hiding something and he's not telling us, and it comes up, and the sheriff shows up and says, hey, King, Kabiyesi, Your Majesty, I'm looking for this man. If it's your picture, then you must go with the sheriff. So that's pretty much it in a nutshell. Did I help you out any?
That's fine. If my listeners have any additional questions about that, they can type it into the chat room, or they can call us at 347-934-0126, 347-934-0126. At this time, I would like to read the Pledge of Oyotunji, and I want you to tell me what it means to you. I'm going to say it in Yoruba, and then I'm going to say it in English. And then I'm going to, just because it's something that I want to share for people to be able to listen to and get a little bit of understanding or insight into Oyotunji. And it goes, Nyashe Kanki Fabalashe, Emi Kole Kolo Durati, Tiabati Joba Yoruba, Moburuba Ibo Line, Injekolo Luko Bami, Momushe Wayemi Olukuluku, Tia Sin Alakia Nialogo, Atia Farmer Shedale, Atia Sin Tawadalo, Ariku Babawa. JKB Koja, Ogidibo, Orisha, Africa. I am compelled by a spiritual force that I cannot resist to swear my eternal allegiance to the king and the flag of the Yoruba nation. Therefore, in the name of my king, I solemnly swear to do everything in my power and use every means conceivable for the welfare of my people and the preservation of the customs and the traditions of my ancestors. So let it be, all ye gods of Africa.
Yes, that is the Pledge of Allegiance here at Oyotunji. It's the pledge that we were required to say in grade school, all the way up to 12th grade. Every morning, you had to repeat both versions of that pledge. Now, it's interesting because